we also thought would be helpful would be to hear what it means for someone to be the recipient of that generosity and that support. And so we've asked Phil Hansbro to talk about being one of Neil's research projects that he's supported. So Phil.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks to Asthma New South Wales to giving me the opportunity to talk to you guys this evening, and to again thank Neil and Noel for their support. So I started my research program nearly 10 years ago now, and I was a microbiologist originally, and I came to Newcastle, and I was always interested in asthma, and I thought maybe we can look at asthma from a different angle. So lots of people think that one of the reasons people get asthma is because we don't get enough infections that potentially result in people becoming more allergic, and that's potentially how they become an asthmatic. But there's also lots of information about certain infections that lead people to think that some types of infections can actually make asthma worse or cause the development of asthma. And so I thought that would be a really interesting research project to get into, looking at how these different infections interact with asthma. And so I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about different infections and how we can investigate them. And so I made a few grant applications early in my career, and I was lucky enough to get one of these Asthma New South Wales sustainability grants. And this was my first break into asthma research, and that helped us develop our mouse models of asthma. So now we can actually take a mouse and we can give it asthma. And then we can also take another mouse and we can give it an infection and see how the infection develops. And then, once we've done that, we've got the ability to see how the infection influences the development of asthma in the same mouse. And so our first Asthma Foundation grant helped us to develop these models, and we showed that a particular infection that's caused by respiratory chlamydial infection actually makes asthma worse. And so from there, we've been able to study how chlamydia makes asthma worse. And we've shown how it interacts with the immune system to cause exacerbations and worsen the development of asthma. And from there, we've been able to develop vaccines against chlamydia as potentially a new prevention against asthma. So there's the potential where we can vaccinate people against chlamydia to stop them getting infection-induced asthma. And that all came about from our first Asthma Foundation grant. And since then, that's resulted in 2 consecutive NHMRC grants. And that's really progressed the work. And so now we're really moving forward in trying to develop these new vaccines for chlamydia to stop chlamydia-associated asthma. So that was one of the infections that we thought promotes the development and the exacerbations of asthma. Now, talking to some people at the John Hunter Hospital, they were telling me that whenever they see their asthmatics and they come in with pneumonia, it makes their asthma less severe. So that got me thinking, maybe these bacteria might be good for these asthmatics. And so a different kind of bacteria called Streptococcus pneumoniae causes the majority of pneumonia. So we thought, maybe we can use this bacteria as a prevention or a treatment for asthma. So once again, I spent a few months writing a grant application to the NHMRC, which didn't quite get there. But once again, we were lucky enough to get an Asthma Foundation grant to support that project. And since we've been able to progress with that project, we've developed another mouse model of infection with this Streptococcus pneumoniae and shown that this bacteria actually protects against the development of asthma in a mouse. So, unfortunately, we're not allowed to go around giving people these infections, and so we have to determine what is it about these bacteria that suppresses asthma. So we've then been able to take with these grants, we've been able to take apart this bacteria and find out what components of the bacteria are protective against asthma. And so now we're at a stage where we've identified these components, and there's 2 of them that we're interested in, and we can then go about developing a vaccine using these components to suppress the development or the exacerbation of asthma. And so that's what we've been doing with these grants. And now we're in a position where we're looking to progress into a clinical trial with some of these strep pneumoniae vaccines to try and treat asthmatics, and that's one of the next steps forward. Another really important point about these sustainability grants is that they also support up-and-coming young researchers. David's going to talk to us about his experiences, but in my lab they've been associated with 3 PhD students that have already graduated and another 5 that are performing their studies, all about asthma. And in fact, one of them has graduated last year, and now he's trying to establish himself as an early career researcher, and so he's one of the new asthma researchers for the future. So as well as progressing the research, these grants are also helping us to develop the next crop of young researchers as well. And whenever I look back on these grants, one of the most satisfying things about these grants is that over the years we've managed to generate tenfold the amount of research funding that we got from these research grants. So by these seed funding grants, we've been able to multiply our funding tenfold to increase the amount of research that we can do on asthma. So they're real value for money, both in sustaining the research that's ongoing, producing the outcomes, multiplying the amount of grant funding that is allocated to asthma, and also building the careers of early researchers who are going to be the next crop of researchers to help us produce better preventions and cures for asthma. So I'd once again like to thank Neil and Norma and everybody else who's contributed to funding from Asthma New South Wales. We couldn't have done any of this work without that seed funding and all the outcomes that it's produced.